Hello everyone and welcome back to Code with Beto. In this video, we're going to learn how to create a budget application. We're going to be using the Expo SDK 50 as well as the latest version of the SQLite library that comes with Expo as well. Obviously, the application is very fun. Actually, this is a kind of application that I think I'm going to be using personally. And if we reload, of course, this data is going to live locally in the device. Some of the advantages, of course, is that we don't need an internet connection for this. And for some applications, this is a good approach, like for example, a budget body application. Let's say that I want to keep track of my expenses and I don't want to share this information with anyone. So as you can see here in the demo, this data is going to live locally. It looks very simple, I know. It looks like a to-do app, but of course this is very complex. For example, these expense types that you can see here and the income expense types, the income types that you can see here, like bonus, part-time job, all these options are being queried from database, which means we can scale this in a more complex application, right? So for example, let's say that I create a new amount and let me show the keyword here. Let's say just 12.59, right? Description, maybe I don't want to write anything. Let's just search for a coffee emoji. And then this is an expense. So let's select, I don't know, like breakfast or dining out, right? Now, I'm labeling this as dining out, which means this category that we can see here is actually going to allow me to fetch, then if I want, to fetch or query all the expenses that are dining out. And then we can perform operations, show insight to the user. So if I hit save here, you can see that now we have this label dining out. And, we have the minus because it was an expense, and then some description, right? The date. Now, here I have this card summary for February 2024, which is the current month that I'm recording this video. And this is real data, right? We are fetching all the transactions and then we are adding the income and then the expenses, and then we are calculating the total. So for example, if I delete, let's say, this Apple Vision record that we have here, we have savings minus 3,000, which is the Apple Vision. If I delete this by just long pressing, okay, you can see that this is updated. If I reload, this is all being saved locally, instantly. And we have, many records here. We could also apply if we want pagination. If we were to have thousands of records, we also have the possibility of give the database to the user and allow them to export this file if they would like to, maybe save this data in other place. If you want to make this more complex, you could also, I don't know, save the database somewhere in the cloud. But for this specific case, this is great. Like I mentioned, we're going to be using Expo SDK 50. So as you may imagine, this is going to work as well on Android. This is how it looks on Android. So very similar thing. Let me close this because we're not going to be using it. Now, because we are going to be using Expo SQLite library here, that actually allows us to import a database. So this is really nice because let's say that you already have a database that is an SQL database and you want to, just load this database into your application. You can do that with Expo SQLite, and we are going to learn how to do this. So this is the app, guys. Of course, I'm just showing very basic information here. You could improve this. You could show more insightful information based on dates, based on relations that you can create between tables. And yeah, so this is what it is. I'm very excited about this project. I really enjoyed creating this application. And I think I'm gonna keep working on this after this video. I just wanted to show you guys how you can do something similar. But yeah, now before we jump into creating this application, I want to mention that at codewithbeto.dev you can find this project, if you go to projects, here it is. It's the first one, budget body app. And if you click on this, you're going to find the SQL statements that we're gonna be using, as well as the source code of this application in my GitHub. So if you want to follow along step by step, you can do so easily by cloning the code and then follow along. Now that being said, if you want to become a master in React Native, don't forget to check out the React Native course. And also, if you want to master TypeScript, actually, we're going to be using TypeScript in this video. This application is fully typed, which is going to allow us to scale very easily and improve maintainability of this code. I would highly recommend that you check the React with TypeScript course that we have here. This is a fundamental base that you and a great resource that you can use to improve your TypeScript skills, and then you could actually jump into React Native or whatever other framework that uses TypeScript. Also in this React with TypeScript course, we learn React, Next.js, we learn how to deploy applications, how to handle styles, state management, routing, and a bunch of things. We actually have this sneak peek that you can check it out at codewithbeto.dev/learnreact. So now you know. Now that being said, let's actually go to the projects, and I'm going to select this budget body app. This is the first thing that we need to do. Of course, this is a different video because I'm recording this video right now, but of course you're going to find the thumbnail according to this video, right? So if I scroll down, you can see that I have here some introduction, and I actually want to talk with you guys a little bit about SQLite. So SQLite, it's been around for quite a bit of time, and actually it's a library that is written in C, right? It implements a fully featured SQL database, and it's built into all phones. So that means that you can just use an SQLite on any phone, a database in any phone, and also most of computers. So this is pretty nice, and currently over 1 trillion SQLite databases are active, which is pretty cool. So if we keep scrolling down, you're gonna find dependencies that we're gonna be using for this project. The dependencies required for this project are just SQLite and Expo file system and Expo asset. We're gonna be using these dependencies to import a database. We're gonna learn how to do that as well. But if you want to just create a new database directly from your application, you can do so by using Expo SQLite. And then just to improve UI, navigation, and better user experience, we're gonna be using React Navigation, and then this segment control view. The segment control view, it's these two segments that you can see here in the app. And then we're gonna be using as well a pretty nice library, React Native auto size text. This is pretty cool because, for example, you can see here in the numbers, let's say that we have a very large number. Let's say, I don't know, something like 1 million, like that. And this is just a random expense. So I'm just gonna add some emojis. And then this is, it could be an income or expense. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to say utilities and then save. Now this is a huge number that could easily break my design here, right? But what happens if I save now? You can see that this record is going to be auto-sized. This number is small now, and it's not breaking my design. So this library, auto-size text, it's how we're handling these kind of situations. So pretty cool. Then we're going to be using just the usual for navigation, React Native screens, and save area context. And that's pretty much it. Other than that, this app is very simple so far. So yeah, let's actually start building it. It's actually, oh, by the way, I would highly encourage you guys to just go to my GitHub. Once you have followed me, of course, you need to follow me, download this code, clone this code base, and follow along with me. Okay, so I'm going to move this out of the way. And this is my terminal. So let's actually start building this project. The first thing that I'm going to do is just go to my desktop, And then inside my desktop, I have this test folder. I'm inside this folder now. Now what I want to do is actually create a new folder. So I'm going to say make directory, and the name is going to be budget body app. All right, hit enter. Now let's cd into budget body app. All right, let's clear the terminal. And budget body app folder, it's going to contain my React Native project as well as my database. So let's actually start by creating a database. Alrighty guys, so before we actually start creating our database, you can clone the repo, and once you clone the repo, you're going to find inside the repo this file called db.sql. All right, and let me make this bigger so that you can see. And here we have the step-by-step that we're going to be following. First thing that we need to do is actually create our database, and SQLite 3 is actually already installed in Mac machines, Mac computers, and also I think Windows, but you will need to check. I would say it's already installed, but if you don't have it, you just need to install it, and that's it. Once you have SQLite, you can actually follow along by creating the tables and then inserting some data here. And if you keep scrolling, inserting more data into these two tables. Now, this is going to be a fairly simple database. We're going to have just two tables, but I want to emphasize that we can have very complex interactions with this data, because at the end of the day, this is a fully featured SQL database. So we're going to have some sort of relationship between categories and transactions, right? So transactions is going to have a foreign key, which is going to be the category ID. And then based on that, we can do some queries, right? So let's move this out of the way now that we have this code. And just to double check that you have SQLite 3, I think you can say version or something like that. Okay, yeah, it worked. So I have 3.39.5, right? Already. So the first thing that I want to do is actually create my database. Now, this is before we actually create the React Native application, right? Using Expo. So let's say SQLite 3 and the name of your database. This is very simple. So my database is going to be named my SQLite DB.db. Okay, now let's hit enter. All right, and just like that, we are inside our database, which means we can start creating some tables. The first table that I want to create is going to be categories. So if you type create table if not exist, I mean, this if not exist is optional. Of course, in this case, we know that this table does not exist. Then we need to specify the attributes. For example, it's a category is going to have an ID, name, and type. ID is going to be auto-generated, auto-increment as well, and then name and type are text. Okay. Now we can also have these kind of definitions like check type in. In this case, we're going to check if the type is, I mean, we're going to be handling just expense and income. So you can say type in and then expense income, right? So expense and income, of course, you could, change this. Maybe you want to add something like investments instead of expense. You want to invest the money, you could add investments, right? Now, just to keep it simple for now, let's just hit enter. And yeah, that's it. We have created this table. Let's go ahead and copy the next command, which is going to create a transactions table. We are adding an ID, category ID, amount, date, description. Keep in mind that date, guys, is going to be an integer because we're going to be handling the date in seconds. All right. So that's why I set it as integer. Then description, type and foreign key category. This is basically the relationship between transactions and categories. And then type is going to be also expense or income. Okay, so once we have this, we could hit enter, and we can actually start inserting data into these tables. Now keep in mind that all this is being created in this database, right? My SQLite DB. Cool. So let's actually go ahead and insert our first expense. Okay. So I'm gonna say insert into categories, and then what I want to insert, name and type. Remember that name and type are not auto-generated, so we need to specify them and cannot be null. All right. So name and type are going to be utilities and then expense. So let's hit enter. All right. And now if I say select all from categories, hit enter, you can see that we have one record. The exact same way, I'm going to just copy paste this insert into, let me move this a little bit to the right so that we can see. And this is how it looks. Let's hit enter. All right. And I have basically insert electronics, dining out, breakfast supplies. These are expense. And then we also have some incomes like bonus, online sales. Of course, this is hard coded, but you could actually just add this like that and then allow the user to keep adding more categories so that this can scale based on the user needs. Okay. Now, if I say select all from, select all from categories, you can see that we have these records in database. Okay, this is great. Now, let's actually start creating some expenses just so that we can actually start displaying something in this database when we use this database into our application. So I'm going to insert, as you can see here, some transactions with category ID. It's going to be 1, and then we have the time. Now keep in mind as well, guys, that the time for some of these values are in the future. So keep that in mind, like 2 or 3 months in the future. Okay, so those are going to be some February 2024 expenses. Then I'm going to keep entering more data here. I'm going to be adding some January. As you can see here, this is going to be breakfast, expense, and this is how we can actually just start adding some data. Once you are done adding data, just to double check this, say select all from transactions. Right, and these are my transactions. Now, as you can see, my transactions are only expenses, right? So let's add some income. I'm going to copy paste from my database, and then let's say select all from transactions. All right, now we have expenses and we also have income. You can see the ID, and then we have this category ID, which is the ID, and this is like the relationship between this. So this number that you have here, this 1, basically is going to map to this transaction type. In this case, 1 is going to be expense, weekly groceries. Okay, this is how we are mapping this data. Then we have the amount, which is dollars in this case. Date, remember that date is going to be handled in seconds. That's why we have this number. And then we also have description and type. Description, weekly groceries, expense. Okay, and that's it. That's all we need for now. Once you have your data in your database, you can simply close this by saying .quit and hit enter. Okay, now let's open this budget body folder. So I'm going to say open dot in Mac. And as you can see here, this opened this window. Let me just change this to be icon and make this bigger so that you can see. So inside this folder, we have our DB. Okay, so very simple. This is actually the file that contains the information that we can see here on the left side. So for now, what I want to do is just leave this file here, and we're going to come back to that. Now, the next thing that I want to do is create my application. So let's clear the terminal. And inside this budget body app, let's create a new React Native application. So I'm going to say yarn create Expo app, and I'm going to be using TypeScript. So I'm going to be using a template. All right. Now the template is going to be just blank TypeScript. I don't want to deal with anything else, just blank TypeScript. So let's hit enter, and the name is going to be budget body. Okay, and hit enter. Already that's ready. Now we can actually see the into budget body, and then open this in VS Code by saying cut dot. Now, just as a reference, I'm going to drag and drop this SQL file, which is the file that we use to insert the data and create our database. So please keep in mind that if you clone this code, you can refer to this file so that you don't have to write anything. Okay, nice. So now that being said, let's go actually to the assets folders. And the first thing that I want to do is import my DB. So let's just drag and drop. Okay, and that's it. This is how you could actually just start using this DB. Now this DB is going to be bundled into our application, which means when the user loads this DB for the first time, they are going to see the tables and our records. And on top of that, they can actually start deleting, creating more information, and that is going to be saved here. Okay. So yeah, that's it. Now let's go back to codewithbeto.dev, and let's copy the dependencies that we're going to be using. We already talked a little bit about what we're going to be doing with these dependencies. So let's just copy this, and let's start with installing Expo SQLite. So let's open the terminal here. Let me move this to the left and paste these two, and then copy. Oh, okay. Cannot determine which native SDK your project uses. Oh, what's wrong with this? I think I have to first of all install this. Let's say yarn. I think I needed to install dependencies. Yeah, it seems that my dependencies weren't installed. Okay, so I think it has to do with my Node version. Let's see. Yeah, I'm using 16. I'm not sure if that's the issue. I'm gonna say npm use 19 and then try to install dependencies again. Oh, okay. Because module expo is not installed, please install it with add expo. Okay, yarn add expo. I'm not sure what's going on here. In the meantime, what I want to do is, all right, stop my application. Cool. Let's just run yarn again. Okay, it seems that it's now working. npx install expo SQLite. Okay, and that worked somehow. Let's run the next dependency, which is file system and expo asset. All right, and then let's try to run this all together. Let's see what's happened. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that is navigation, then segment control, and then React Native screens, as well as auto size text. That's actually all the dependencies that we're gonna be using. Now I'm going to just move this out of the way. We're not going to be using it. Well, and also guys, if you want to reference the documentation from Expo, they actually have this really nice Expo SQLite page that you can refer to check the methods and the API basically for this library. Now keep in mind that this is not going to work for web, all right? Okay, so let me just move this out of the way. We already did this thing, right? Install Expo SQLite, and that's all we needed to do. And then if we want to import an existing database, as you can see here, we need to import Expo file system and Expo asset. So this is what we're going to be doing. Let's just go to the code. I can actually just close this now and then move this to the right. Let me just close this warning. Okay, so let's clear the terminal. And I guess now we can say npx expo start. Okay, let me just reload here so that we can load this new app that we created. All right, and this is how it looks. We just have a text. Great. Now, the first thing that I want to do is actually just try to import this database. And once we have imported this database, just display the items that we have inside this database, right? So the first thing that we might want to do is actually just go to the app, which is the entry point of our application. And let's try to load the database here, all right? So let's go up here. We have the Expo file system. So I'm going to say import all as file system from Expo file system. Okay, first thing, let me close Explorer. I'm going to close as well the terminal so that we can see better here. Okay, so we need the file system. Once we have the file system, we also need asset from Expo asset. So let's say import from Expo asset. I'm going to import asset. Okay, nice. All right, so the first thing that I want to do here is actually try to load my DB, my SQLite DB. So I'm going to create a function called load database. And this is going to be an async arrow function that is not going to take any parameters for now. Now, the first thing that we need to do is grab the name of our file. In this case, it's going to be my SQLDB.db. Okay. Once you have the name, you can say db asset equal to, and here we are going to require from the assets, and then we're going to say MySQL DB. So this is basically like the path for this file. This is just the name. This is the actual DB. Okay, the asset DB. Okay, now DB URI is going to be equal to. Now here we need to, grab this from the device. Basically copy this into the device. So I'm going to say asset dot from module, and then we're going to pass this DB asset and then grab the URI. Okay, then once we have the URI, we can say db file path equal to, and I'm going to use a string template here. Then I'm going to grab the file system dot document directory. I'm going to concatenate SQLite and then the name of my DB. So I'm going to say DB name. Okay, this is the file path. Okay, we're grabbing the file system document directory, and then we basically are putting this new file. Okay, this is going to be like the path, just the path. So let's grab the file info. This is going to be equal to away. Then we're going to be using file system again. File system dot get info async. And then we pass the file path of the DB. Okay. Then we need to validate if if this file info does not exist, then we want to create it. Okay. So very important thing here. We are just checking if we already have a database. If we already have a database, we're going to use that database. Otherwise, we are going to create a new one. And then we can use this to create a new one. Okay. So I'm going to say await file system and then make directory async. Okay. One more time, string template. I'm going to say file system dot document directory, and then the directory is going to be SQLite. And the second parameter is going to be intermediates equal to true. Okay. Let's finally say await file system download async. Let's pass the DB URI and DB file path. Okay, so this download async is going to download the contents of a remote URI. The remote URI is going to be the DB, which basically is going to, at the end of the day, in simple words, is going to copy this DB into the file system. Okay, once we have that, we are actually loading the database successfully, and we can use this load database. Okay, so this is like a helper function that you could actually abstract into other file, I believe, and then import here. Okay, and I have an error here. Okay, something weird's going on here because I'm not even calling this function. What happens if I comment this? Okay, that works. Anyways, let's just leave it like that for now. What I want to do now, it's going to be just go inside my app here. And the first thing that I want to do is grab a variable that is going to be db loaded and set db loaded. This is going to be using useState. Now for this, I want to come here and say import all as React from React. And then let's go back here and say that this is going to be using useState. All right. Now this is going to be a Boolean. So we can initialize this to be false. And let's actually add the type here by saying Boolean. Hit save. Okay, we have this warning. Let's just ignore that for now. What I want to do next is use a use effect because I want to load my database as soon as we load this component. So I'm going to call my load database function. And this is a function that returns a promise. So we can say then, and this is going to return if we have loaded the database, right? So I'm going to say set database loaded. Set db loaded equal true. And then if we have an error, I'm going to say catch error console error for now. Just keep it simple and hit save. Okay. So now based on this variable, we can say if we don't have a db loaded, we can simply return, and I'm going to keep this simple. I'm going to say return. I'm going to grab a text that says loading and hit save. Okay, Now I actually want to have this in the middle of my screen, so we could have something like a view, and then we could have an activity indicator that looks something like this. Okay guys, if we try to reload, you can see that we're going to have this error, although this is correct. This is expected because the Expo file system is not able to recognize this .db file. So the way we can fix this is actually by opening our terminal. Let me clear this. And we need to configure our Metro bundler. So let's run npx expo customize metro config.js. If you don't have this file, this is going to generate a metro.config.js file on the left side, as you can see. Okay. Now, once you have this file, we can simply copy paste this here. Basically, we are saying that we want to recognize this .db file. Okay. Once we have that, let's see if this works by saying yarn start and reload the app. Okay, let me close this. Okay, and the app is working now. All right, so let's keep going. Now we have this functionality. We are loading database first thing as soon as we load this application. If we don't have database yet, we can simply display this text. Otherwise, we can display data. Now, there's actually a cool way that we could display a loading state using Suspense. So if you are not familiar with Suspense, I would highly recommend to check out my React with TypeScript course, because we actually dive deeper into how to use Suspense with React. But basically, Suspense is a component that allows us to display a loading state while we are fetching data. In this case, while we are loading the database. So this database, of course, could be, let's say, 100 megabytes or 200 megabytes, and that is going to take some time. So if we use Suspense, we could, fix this issue. Now, let's see how we can use Suspense. The first thing that I'm going to do is actually delete this, because I don't want to be handling states or views in my entry point, in the entry point of my application. And then I can simply say Suspense from React, and inside I'm going to have this an SQLite provider. Okay, so let's say SQLite. Actually, I cannot see this option here, but let's actually come here and import it. So I'm going to go all the way at the top, and I'm going to say import from Expo SQLite. And then to use the latest version of this library, we need to say /next. Okay. This ensures that we're using the latest version, so that we can come here and say SQLite provider. Okay, so now that we have this provider, let's go down here. I'm going to copy and paste it here. Okay, and because we're using this provider that comes with the library, we can simply activate this provider to work with Suspense. So I'm just gonna say use Suspense. You can say equal to true, or if you are a pro, you can just leave it like that. That is going to be true. Now this is yelling at me because we need to specify a database name. Now the database name is going to be this one. So I'm going to grab it from here and hard code it here. This is not going to change often, so don't worry. Okay, and this is how we can use the SQLite provider. Now, this is yelling at me because we need to provide a children here. Now, in order to provide my children, I need to create some screens. So quickly, let's go to the left side and create a new folder called screen. Actually, this should be screens, right? I'm gonna say screens. Inside this folder, I'm going to create a new file, and this is going to be my home screen. So this is home.tsx. Let's export default function home. And this is going to be a very simple view from React Native that is going to display a text from React Native as well that says home screen for now, and hit save. Then we can come back here and use this home component. But instead of doing this, let's actually start creating some navigation, right? So let's go at the top here. I'm going to use a stack navigator. So let's say create native stack navigator from React Navigation. And this is very simple, actually. We can come down here and use a navigation container. Okay. And then just wrap this inside the navigation container. And inside this provider, we can have a stack. Using our stack, this one, we can define the navigation. So I'm gonna say navigator, and inside this, we can have the stack.screen. And the first screen that we are going to have is going to have the name home. Then we can need to specify the component, which is home. Hit save. All right, that is our home screen, as you can see on the right side. Now we have this really nice header. Now I have a warning here. Component is not assignable to a type screen. Okay, I think this is expected. Let's go here, export default function. Oh yeah, I have a typo. Let me just wrap this with parentheses. Okay, and the error goes away. Nice. Now I want to specify a couple things before I continue in my app. I'm going to say here options and header title. It's going to be budget body, and I want to have a large header. So header large title equal to true. Okay, and hit save. I need a comma here. All right, this is how it looks. Now we have this large title, and if we add a scroll view here, this is going to fade into a smaller header. Okay, and this is our app, guys. Now we can actually start working into the home screen, which I think is going to be the more complex screen. Let's delete these that we are not going to be using, like the stash sheet and some other things here. Okay, and let's try to reload the app just to see if we can see this loading database. Continue, reload. Okay, I think I saw it. Now, actually, I was forgetting something, guys. Suspense takes a fallback. And a fallback is just a component that you can render when you are loading, right? So for this case, I want to hard code here a view that is going to have this loading database. Basically, it's the same component. We should actually abstract it in a component. But for now, let's just hard code it like that. Okay, and hit save. Now, just to validate that you are seeing this, what I was doing when I was creating this project is that I set this background color to be red, just so that I know that this is working. So let's see if this works if I reload. Okay, you can see that we can see a red for a millisecond, which means this is working. This is displaying. And if we had a database that is, a large file, this would be rendered. Now at this point, you could actually have here an animation or something more cool, right? But yeah, this is the point. Okay, so let's close this app. Let's actually get to work. We need to display a bunch of information here. Well, not a bunch of information, just display the data that we have loaded already. So the first thing that I want to do in my home screen And actually, guys, I want to mention here that maybe could be a better approach when handling queries with SQLite. A better approach would be like using some sort of state management library like Redux to handle UI updates or UI re-renders. Because at the moment that I'm recording this tutorial, we don't have a re-render every time that we create a new record into our database or every time that we query data. We are not re-rendering anything, and it's hard to make UI updates. So I would highly recommend that to use SQLite with a state management library and basically use SQLite as your backend, right? Although it's living in this in the front end in the assets, I would highly recommend to use it as if we're a backend. Like try to build a layer so that you can have very nice updates on the UI. Anyways, for now we're gonna be updating and creating things and then query data again, query. Every time that we make an update, we query again, which is fine, in small databases. But as this project grows, and if you expect to have a very expensive database, I mean a very large database, I would say just try to do it right from the beginning so that you don't have to then integrate this state management library, or it doesn't get very messy every time that you query data. Okay, anyways, I'm going to start by by querying my categories. So let's create a variable. I'm going to be using React. So let's import all as React from React. And now here I can say equal to use React. Use React, sorry, use state. Okay. Cool. So because we are using TypeScript, guys, so we need to do this the right way, right? So let's go ahead and create a new file in the root folder that I'm going to call types.txt. And let's start defining the data that we're going to be using. So we have categories, but we also need to import transactions, right? So we need to create the transaction and category type here. So let's create two interfaces, one for transaction, one for category. We are defining basically the same thing that we have in our database. You see, we have category ID, amount. So I would highly encourage you guys to type this the way we created our tables. This is going to prevent a bunch of headaches in the future, especially because we don't have type checked when we are dealing with these databases with SQLite. Okay, so remember we have either expense or income so far. And then we also have category, amount, date, description. Date is a number we're handling in seconds. Okay, remember that. Category is going to be either expense or income, and then the name. The name could be something like part-time job, income, dining out, expense. Got it? Okay. Now we actually need. I think we're good with this for now. Let's just go to home. Let's fully type this use state by saying that this is going to be of type category from my types. And actually this is an array. Now, if this is syntax new for you, this syntax is new for you guys, I would highly recommend that you check out my React with TypeScript course at codewithbeto.dev. We actually learn how to master TypeScript. So this is pretty easy. We learn how to use generics, how to create types, manage arrays, etc. Okay, let's continue. We have categories, then we also have transactions. So let's just duplicate this and say transactions and set transactions. All right, this is going to be of type transaction from my types, and this is actually an array as well. Okay, so we have transactions, we have categories. I think we're good for now. Let's just use our DB. Now, because we are very smart and actually set it up this SQLite provider here, we now are able to just grab this DB very easily within this provider. So inside home screen here, we can use this context by to grab the instance of our database. So I'm gonna say const db equal to use SQLite context. Keep in mind that we are using /next. That's all we need. Pretty cool and clean, right, so far? So let's actually create our first query. So let's import transactions. For that, I'm going to create a function. This is going to be an async function. So let's create a simple async function with the name getData. This is not going to get any parameters. We are just going to make a query. So let's say const result equal to await, and then we can use the DB. And then we have a bunch of methods. And actually, I would highly encourage you guys to go to the Expo documentation and check out all the methods and what are they doing, what are they for. But in this case, because we want to get a list of records, I'm going to use get all async. And this is going to take a query. A query is going to look something like this. Select all from transactions. And then that's it. Okay. Then we can say console log result. All right. So let's hit save. Now this get data actually needs to be called somewhere. And a good place to call this would be in a use effect. So let's create a use effect. I want to run this use effect actually every time my DB changes. So I can say DB dot with transaction async. With transaction async is an async function to execute within a transaction. Okay, automatically commit rollback based on task result. This transaction is not exclusive and can be interrupted by other async queries. All right. So I think we use with transaction async when we want to perform more than once transaction, I think, more than once query or more than once operation in the database. But for now, let's just use this with transaction and let's say async. This is going to contain a callback async function. And then we can simply say await get data. Okay, let me open the terminal and hit save. Okay, and if I hit save, you can see that I'm getting here the data. It's an array that contains the items inside objects. Each object contains category, expense, description, weekly, ID, etc. Okay, so we have the data. But, if we were a junior software engineer, we would leave this like that. But because we are not a junior software engineer, we actually need to improve this piece of code here. First thing is using a generic to type this. This is going to return a type transaction for each record. So we can actually type this by saying transaction. And actually, I want to select my transactions order by date. So because we know that we can filter and order data directly from the query, we can say order by and then say date descending. Okay, and let's close this with a semicolon. Okay, hit save. Now here I can actually say set transactions equal to result and hit save. Now inside my component, I can actually just come here and iterate over my transactions. But I actually, instead of doing that, I would highly recommend you guys to create a new component. So let's come here and create a folder called components. Inside this components folder, let's create a transactions list.tsx component. Okay, and this transaction list is going to get some information. So let's say export default function transaction list. Okay, return. So transaction list, as you may imagine by now, is going to get transactions. Then I also want to pass categories. And you're going to see why in a moment. And finally, because we're going to be handling, rendering each transaction component inside this list, we need to have some sort of functionality that we could handle directly from this component. But because we're handling the state here and we have the instance of the DB here, it's easier for us to just handle these transactions and update these transactions in categories here so that we re-render everything that is using these transactions down here, which at the end of the day is going to be this component. In other words, we are going to need as well delete transaction component. I mean function. This is a function. Okay. Now we need to type this. So I'm going to just type this like that. This is going to be of type category. This is going to be of type transaction. And set transactions actually is going to be, is not going to be used here actually. So I'm going to delete this. The lead transaction is going to be used. The lead transaction is going to be a function that is going to take the ID of the transaction that we want to delete, and it's going to be an async function, so it's going to return a promise. Okay. Now, finally, let's get to the component. This is going to be a view that is going to basically just iterate over transactions, and each transaction, it's going to return, let's say return, it's going to return a touchable opacity from React Native as well. And inside here, we're going to have a transaction item component that we need to create. But before we do that, I want to add some key here, transaction dot. And because we're using TypeScript and we fully type everything, we have this really nice autocomplete. Okay. Now I want to check my active opacity to be 0.7. I don't want this to be very opaque. And then on long press, I want to delete this transaction and then passing just the transaction ID. Great. Now, because we're using TypeScript, we are able to use this function, although we haven't created this function in the home screen, but that's okay. Okay, so we have the transaction ID. Then we have the transaction item. For now, let's just create a text from React Native and let's just display transaction dot description and amount maybe. Let's say amount transaction dot amount, and that's all I want for now. So let's hit save. This is going to be my transaction list component. Let's go to the home screen, and instead of having this, I want to have my transaction list. But before I actually use this transaction list, I'm just going to comment this for now. Instead of having this view, I want to change this to be a scroll view from React Native. Okay, and then this scroll view, let's add a content container style. it's going to have a padding of 15 and padding vertical of 170. It's safe. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's all we have for now. Let's actually just use this transaction list. This is yelling at me because we need to pass categories, and we have categories here. We need to pass transactions. Let's do that. And then we also need to pass the lead transaction. So this lead transaction is going to be a function that I'm going to create here. It's going to be an async function as well. So let's delete transaction. Now this is going to take an ID of type number, and let's grab DB instance and say with transaction async. Let's pass the async arrow function here. No parameters. Let me delete this. And here, let's just await DB run async. And here is where the magic happens. Delete from transactions where ID equal to, we are passing this ID, right? So you might be tempted to do something like this, but this is not a good idea because this might lead to SQL injection. So the way we pass parameters to a query is by using the question mark. Okay, so in the place that you want this variable ID, you just pass this question mark, and then after your query you have a comma, and then use these parameters to pass these variables here. Okay, so if you say ID, this is going to replace this question mark here. Okay, now this is the point where it makes sense to have these transactions and all the state inside this home, because this is not going to retrigger or re-render the screen. And although we are going to delete an item, at this point, we are going to keep looking at this item although it's deleted, because we have it in this item in this list. It's just deleted in the database. So if you reload the app, you shouldn't be able to see this anymore. But in order to have a re-render here, what I want to do is just say await get data again. So I'm calling this get data, which means we are going to refetch, and this time, once we refresh and set transactions again, we shouldn't be able to see this transaction ID or this transaction at all. Okay. Cool. So now I can come here and say delete transaction equal to delete transaction, hit save. Already beautiful. As you can see on the right side, we have this scroll view, and it's changing my large title. Nice, every time that I scroll. I'm very happy with this result, and this is looking kind of clean so far. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do, guys, it's going to be create a new component for my transactions, my transaction list item. So let's say transaction list item.tsx. Okay, and export the default function transaction list item. I'm going to copy this name because I'm too lazy to write it. Okay, and this transaction list name, it's going to return a item. So let's go back here. Instead of rendering, sorry, let's go here. Wait, sorry, here. Instead of rendering this text, I'm going to copy and paste it here. Of course, this transaction list item is going to get some properties. So let's actually define an interface for the properties that this component is going to get. This is going to look something like this. Now you may notice that I'm basically duplicating the transaction type here, but we could actually change it if you want. by saying this is a transaction of type transaction from my types, and this is going to be category or undefined. Got it? Okay. Now, if I go to my item, I can destructure this transaction and category info, but I need to specify the type, right? Okay, cool. This is looking good. These are the properties that we are getting. We're going to get a transaction as well as a category info. Category info, guys, is going to be basically the relation, right? Each transaction, let's check the type. Checking the type helps a lot. This is going to come with a category ID. But how do I know what is the value of this category? If this is a number, right? This could be category ID 1 or 2 or 3. So if we pass to this list item component, the category info, we could actually just grab this information here. Okay. So what I want to do now is just basically render a card here. Let me import this text from React Native just for now. Okay, and let's just hit save for now, okay? We need to pass category info. Category info is going to come from, let's go to the list. Instead of rendering this text, I want to render transaction list item. This is going to get a transaction. So let's pass the transaction and also category info. Category info, this is something a little bit tricky that we need to calculate here. Remember, we're passing categories here, but this is an array. And I want to pass just the category specific for this item. So we can simply add a simple calculation here that I'm going to name category for current item equal to categories, and then I'm going to use the find method to iterate for each category. And for each category, I want to say category dot ID. If the ID of the category is equal to transaction dot category ID, this means that we are going to save this information into this variable, which allows me to just pass it here. Okay, and if I hit save, nothing is going to happen. But if I come here and say category info dot name, hit save, you can see that the category info at this point is going to be nothing. This is weird. Category ID equal to, okay. Let's try to reload this just to see if this works. Okay, this makes completely sense because if you remember, we are passing just an empty array in the home screen. So let's quickly fix that. We need to, apart from getting all transactions, we need to have a categories, right? We need to get all categories. So let's go to the get data, and apart from getting all this information and setting it, let's copy. Let's say categories result instead of result here. And instead of transaction, this is going to be a category. Okay, and then select all from categories. Finally, set categories equal to categories result. And if I hit save, you can see that this query is working fine. And we're getting utilities, breakfast, etc. Awesome, this is great. This is working as expected. Let's go back to the item and let's actually, make this item look good. Now, before I do that, I want to create a component that is going to allow me to create a beautiful UI and reusable card component. So let's create a new folder inside components. I'm going to name this UI, and inside UI, I'm going to create a card component. So let's create a card.tsx. Okay, and this card is just going to be a view. So I'm going to say export default function card, and this is going to be a view from React Native that I'm adding a shadow, as you can see here. Now I'm saying that this is going to get card props, and card props is going to be an interface that I'm going to be using here. Card props extends React with props children because we are going to have a children. We expect to have a children. And then I want to be able to change the style of this view if I want to in the component that I'm using this card. So if I add this style property, we can override these styles with this property. And this is going to be of type view style. And this comes from React Native, okay? So we don't need to do anything else. And hit save. Now let's go to the item, and we can wrap these children inside a card component and hit save. And just like that, we have this beautiful looking card on the right side. Awesome, right? Alrighty, so we have the card, and then we need to have some sort of validation here. So before I do that, I want to create a new file that is going to help me validate the color and the emojis that I want to render based on the category and based on the transaction, based on the transaction type, either expense or income. We're going to have some sort of validations, right? So if I come here and create a new file, this file is going to be constants.txt. And this file is going to be in charge of just define the properties that we expect. So the properties that I expect, I could actually just fetch this from DB, but for now, I want to hard code some of them. So categories, I want to render an emoji depending on the category. So I want to hard code this. If it's groceries, I'm going to render a card. Rent, a house. Salary, money. These are just emojis that are going to be rendered based on the title of the category. Now, it would be a good idea to ask the user to enter this emoji when we create a new category so that we don't have to worry about this, maybe just for the items that we just want to include at the beginning. But if the user wants to add some manually, they should be able to choose an emoji, right? And then we have colors depending on the category as well. So as you can see, I have these colors, and this is mapped in this object. And each one of these is going to have a color different. Now, of course, guys, you can just copy paste this if you don't want to write it, but you can tweak it as well if you need to. Okay, so once we have these constants, we can actually go to the item, and this item is going to have some validations. First of all, we're going to be using an icon for this item, and the icons that I'm going to be using is going to be from Ant Design. So let's just import Ant Design here. Now, this is where as well we're going to be using the text that is going to be changing depending on the size of the text that is going to be changing dynamically. So let's import React Native auto size text. I'm going to import as well my constants. So I'm going to say from constants here. Okay. And we're going to import both category colors and category emojis, right? Then what else? I think that's all we need for now. Now, the thing that I want to calculate here is going to be the icon name, the color, category color, and emoji. Using my constants, right? So this is going to look something like this. Now, we need to grab the transaction.type, and based on the transaction.type, I want to validate if it is expense, then I want to render this, otherwise that. If it is expense, the color is going to be this, otherwise that. Got it? Emoji color, we are grabbing the colors at position category dot name. If we don't have a name, we are just defaulting to this one, okay? This is going to allow me to just grab these variables and display them right away. For example, let's start by creating some other components that are going to be here. I want to divide this, right? So the first thing that I want to do is have the amount. So the amount is going to be a component that I'm going to create here. Let's say amount. And this component is going to return a view from React Native. This is going to have my design icon with the name, icon name. By the way, I need to specify this here. Icon name. I'm going to pass the color and the amount in the properties. I'm going to destructure this type. So I'm going to say icon name. This could be either, the icons that you choose. In this case, I'm going to use minus circle plus circle. Okay. The color is going to be a string. Amount is going to be a number. So this design icon is going to look something like this. Okay, we're just grabbing the name from the properties and the color as well. Okay, and here is where I'm going to use my auto size text. Okay, this auto size text is being imported here. And then we also have resize text mode. This is an auto size text because this number can be very large. And then we are adding an amount style. So I'm going to create some styles down here. This amount is going to just have a font size of 32. Let me import this from React Native, and font weight bold or 800. Okay, so this is my style amount, and then I'm just setting a max width of 80%. Number of lines 1. Mode, resize text mode. This is an interface, an enum, that we are importing from this library as well. And then setting max lines, font size of 32 as well. And this is all I need for my amount. My amount is going to live inside this card component. So let's just say amount, and this is going to expect some variables, as you may imagine by now. So at the end of the day, this is going to look like this. The amount is actually going to come from the transaction.amount. Okay, and everything else, color, it's being grabbed from here. Got it? Hit save. Okay, that is how it looks. Now I need to have this amount, and I need to also have, I'm going to delete this text. Let's just leave that for now. Let's come back to this item. Yep. And here I'm going to add a style from my styles.row, and hit save. Cool. Awesome. This is looking good. Now let's create a category item component very similar to this one. So I'm just going to paste it up here. This category item is going to get the category color, info, and emoji. And based on that, we are grabbing the category container style that comes from here. Just border radius, align self start, and we are changing the background color based on the category color that we are passing here, plus 40 of opacity. Okay, so we can now come here and use this category item after the amount and hit save. And that is how it looks. It looks awesome, right? Um, yep, this is a component. Sorry, this one is a component. Very easy. It's just a text with a background color that is changing based on the category. Okay, and then finally, I want to have the information that goes to the right. Okay, this is going to be an external inside component, right? This component is going to live inside this component as well, but I want to, create these components, mini components, so that we don't have everything inside here. This is going to be very easy to understand now here. And this transaction info is going to look something like this, guys. We are going to pass the ID, date, description. Remember, date, it's a number. That's why we are multiplying by 1,000 to get the correct date. And then we are changing this to date string. These are just text, very simple. And this is the style for the container. So if I come here and say transaction info, and let's pass this from the transaction.date, transaction.description, and transaction.id. Hit save. And hit save. Okay, this is not saving. Okay, there we go. Okay, and that is how it looks, guys. As you can see, we can see the data correctly. Now, I want to have this from left to right, so I'm going to create a view and add a style from my styles dot row, and this view is going to wrap the amount and category item. Hit save. Actually, this is going to wrap the entire thing, but the amount and category needs to be inside another view. So let's put this inside another view. Okay, and finally, this view needs to have a style as well. And I'm going to set the width to be just 40%. Hit save. And finally, just a separation between items, which is a gap of 3. Okay. And that's it. Okay, this is how it looks. Very simple so far. Nothing very complicated. We have the items. And yeah, so let's say if I press, we are deleting, as you can see there, because we are calling this function, and then we are querying again data. Okay, so now we have this component ready. What I want to do now is actually, I think, just go to my list. Let's check out this list. I want to have a gap actually, so that we have some spacing between these items. So I'm gonna say gap of 15. Okay, and now it looks beautiful, right? Heck yeah. Okay, I think that's all I need here. Let's just close this, close the item, and let's go to the home screen. We have so far just the transaction list and looks good. Apart from that, I want to have a transaction summary component, right? This is going to live at the top of this. So this transaction summary, it could be actually another component here. But just to make it easy for us, I'm going to put it down here. So let's say cons transaction, well, let's say function transaction summary, because I want to show the user, how much money have they spent, and what things they are buying with their money and how they are spending their money, right? So let's just say that this is going to receive a transactions by month, and this should be the current month, right? So the transactions by month, let's just say that is any for now so that we don't have some errors here. But ideally, this is going to have the following structure. This is going to be an object that is going to come with total income and then total expenses. Okay. And ideally, these total income and total expenses are going to be numbers. Okay. So if I have the total income and if I have the total expenses, I can quickly calculate the savings by saying total income minus total expenses, right? Very simple. So then we can say um, readable period. Readable period. This is just by setting the date in a way that the user can understand. And actually, I just want to show the month, the current month. So if I grab the date and then say to local string, I can actually specify that this is the default format. And then I can actually say that the month I want it to be long and the year I want these month long and then year I want this to be numeric. All right. And why am I getting an error here? Okay. I'm using single quotes. Okay, it's safe. This is basically just the month, the current month, in my case, February. And yeah, so once we have this, we can actually just come down here and say return. I want to use my card component, and inside my card component, I want to have a text, and this text is going to be summary for, and then let's say readable period. It's safe. Now let's go here and use this transaction summary component that is going to take transactions transactions by month. So let's just copy paste this here, equal to transactions by month, right? But we need to calculate this actually. So these transactions by month, let's just create a new variable at the top. And let's create an interface. Let's go to the types and let's say export interface and transactions by month. Okay, and here I'm just going to come back here and copy the type, paste it here, hit save, come back here, and instead of having this thing, we can say transactions by month. Alrighty, now we can use this to type as well here. And then instead of having these transactions by month, we can have this structure directly and just delete this. Okay. Nice. Now we are expecting property transaction amount not exists. Something is going on here. Let's see, the transactions by month is just total expenses, total income. Why TypeScript is yelling at me? Property transaction amount does not exist. Okay. Yes, guys, instead of having these transactions by month, we actually expect total expenses. which we can grab from transactions by month dot total expenses, and then total income, transactions by month, total income. It's safe. Okay, there we go. And as you can see, we have this summary up here. Cool, so we have this. But now the important thing here, guys, is actually making the query that is going to calculate these transactions. So these transactions are going to be some complex, right? They have some complexity, but I want to showcase how this is done, how this can be done with SQLite, right? So here we have our get data. We need to update this card every time we delete or we create a new card. So this is the perfect place. I'm going to start by we're going to need the date because this is going to be dynamic, right? Based on the current month of the user. So let's say now equal to new date. Let's grab the date. Now I need to grab the month. So we need actually not just the month, but the first date of the month. Because at the moment that I'm recording this video, it is February 18, but I want to see my transactions from February 1 to February 28. So the first day of the current month is going to be equal to get full year now dot get month at position 1, right? Cool. So day 1 of the month. And then the end of the month, this is a little bit trickier because we need to subtract you get the first day of the month, then subtract 1 millisecond to get the end of the current month. Okay, this is something that I had to use ChatGPT for, but basically this is going to get me the end of the month. And finally, I need to say end of the month, set milliseconds minus 1. Cool, right? Okay, then we need to convert these to Unix timestamps. Why? Because if you remember, we are handling dates with seconds. So I need to basically just floor this divided by 1,000. This is going to get me the seconds, then milliseconds, then I divide by 1,000, so I get the seconds. And once I have the seconds, I can start my query. Okay, this would be a good idea to abstract into a helper function, of course, but for now, let's just leave it like that. So the same thing that we have done so far. We need to specify the query here. This is going to be total transactions by month, and the type is going to be total transactions by month. This is a type, and let me delete this curly. Okay, get all async. This is going to return total expense and total income. So this is going to be a tricky one. Let's start by saying select, and then we need to say basically we need to pass these two things. Okay, we need to pass the sum when type equal to expense or income. Basically here we are calculating the sum of the transactions and to specify that this is from the transactions, I'm going to say here from transactions. Okay, so from transactions, I want to sum if they are expense, the total. And I want to name this as total expenses. I want to name this as total income if the type is equal to income. Okay, otherwise 0. Okay, this is how you can do this kind of stuff. Of course, this is a little bit advanced. You don't have to really know this. You can simply try to search for the query that you need. But yeah, so from transactions, we are grabbing the total and set these two variables. And then once we have the total, I need to say where date, we need to specify the date, right? It's greater than my start month and less than my end month timestamp, okay? So I can say end date is less than or equal than my end month. Now remember, this is how we pass variables in an array. So I can say start month timestamp and end month timestamp. Okay. Finally, set transactions by month equal to transactions by month at position 0. This is going to be an array, so that's why I'm grabbing position 0 here. All right. And if I hit save, this should work. All right. This is all we needed to know. We are grabbing a range. This is something, a little more advanced, but me as a user, I would really appreciate if you can tell me how much money I'm expending in this current month so that I can, stop spending or maybe spend a little more if I want to. Cool. So now that we have that, we are passing that here, and then we can simply, display this to the user. So let's scroll down here, and then let's summary for period. In this case, it's February, which is fine. Then I can have a text. But before I do that, I want to have a couple more functions inside this component that are going to help me. Let me import this from React Native. These functions basically determine the style based on the value, either positive or negative, because if we have negative numbers, we don't want to display, we want to display red, otherwise green. This is for the icon. And then we want to display as well, not for the icon, for the text. Then we also want to display a format that is monetary values, right? So here basically we are just grabbing the absolute value so that we don't have negative numbers. To fix two, we only want two numbers after the dots, and then we are just concatenating that. If the value is less than 0, then we add this minus, but this minus is going to be before this dollar sign. Okay, makes sense? Otherwise, nothing. Okay. And finally, we can simply display this inside this card. Of course, this is just going to be text, as you can see here. And this style, actually, I'm going to need to add some styles down here because I didn't want to abstract this component. I was too lazy. So let's import this. And this is just, format for the text. And we're just using this format money functions and hit save. Already. And this is pretty much all we needed to do here, guys. Now, this container needs to be added here. So I'm going to say style equal to styles.container so that we have this nice spacing. Okay, cool, guys. Now, remember these, these functions are going to be run every time that we get this data. So if I minimize this, we are getting data every time we delete and every time we load the app. So if I delete some of these transactions, we should be able to see that this is updating. So let me see if this is actually happening. We are getting data every time we delete. Yeah. Okay. As you can see, the numbers are updating. Okay, so let me reload. Now you can see that this is Friday, February 9. Now, so let's add an expense at this point. I would like to add an expense, but we don't have an interface to add anything yet, right? But so far, this is looking good with the information we have. This is showing as expected. So let's actually go ahead and create a new component to start adding transactions. For that, I'm going to create a new component here. and let's name it add transaction.tsx. All right, and this add transaction component is going to have honestly a bunch of data. Of course, if you were to use, a state management library, that would be a better idea. I'm sure this is not the best way to do this, but for now, let's just use a very simple component that is going to have a bunch of data here. So I'm going to say add transaction, and this is going to take, actually, I want to take the insert transaction function that we need to create. Okay, and this insert transaction function is going to be a function that is going to take a transaction as parameter, and this transaction is going to be of type transaction. Okay, and this type transaction, actually, where is it? This should come from my types. Anyways, this is going to be a promise. This is going to return a promise void. Okay, and transaction should come from my types. Insert transaction. Okay, I think I have a typo here. Yeah, I was missing the function. Okay, so transaction from types. All right. Now, here, guys, remember we have in our database, if I just go to this file, we have categories, right? And we want to show these to the user every time that they create a new transaction, because each transaction needs to be attached to a category, either expense or income, and either utilities or something else. So in this case, we need to use our DB to display these categories. So I'm going to just copy paste here, guys, because I don't want to spend a bunch of time just typing this for you. I'm going to import React, and then I'm going to import use context SQLite context. These variables are basically just to display the UI, category selected, amount, description, category ID, and DB. All this is just to create a new record. Okay, so we need to get the expense type. This is going to be a list, so I'm going to create a function, async function, that is going to use my DB, and it's going to return an array of categories. Okay, we are setting these categories here, which is name string. If you pay attention, this is going to return the categories. Okay, and actually this is of type category. Okay, cool. So we have this get all things, select all from, and actually at this point we need to have uppercase if you want. It's a good practice. Where type equal type. Got it? Set categories, and then we need to call this when we mount this component. So let's create a use effect. Get expense type equal to current tab. Current tab every time we change the current tab, because we want to fetch this based on the type, right? So if the type is income, we want to fetch just the categories that are type income. If it is expense, we want to fetch all categories where type is equal to expense. Make sense? And this category is going to be changing based on the tab that the user has selected. Okay, that's why we also have type selected and current tab. Okay, cool. So then we also need a function to handle save. When I hit save, I need to actually save. So I'm going to create this handle save function. This is putting in the console the input that we're getting, and then we are inserting using this insert transaction that we are going to pass as parameter. We are going to pass, just the entire data that we need to create a new record. Date are seconds, so milliseconds divided by 1,000, we are getting the seconds. And then resetting everything to default, which is empty or category equal to 1, and that's it. Got it? All right, so let's start by creating some components that I'm going to be reutilizing. Okay, and these components are going to live down here. First, let me import this from React Native, and this is going to be from material icons. So let me just update my imports here. Okay, let's go back down here. First of all, I want this add button that is going to take the set is adding transaction function. This is just using React state. This is a setter. Then we're using a touchable opacity. At this point, I was writing the styles in line because I was too lazy, to create styling. But yeah, this is how it looks. This is just a button that is going to handle adding the item. Okay, so after this, I have this category button. This category button is going to be a touchable opacity as well. And set type selected is going to be equal to the title, because each one of these is going to be a category item, either expense or income. And this button needs to be selected if, that's why we have this is selected, if the user presses it. So once the user presses this button, we want to set this as the selected. And then we also want to handle the styling based on is selected, right? So if is selected, we want to have this blue, otherwise gray, okay? And just the title. This is just a simple touchable opacity. And finally, we can simply use these components in this view. So let me create this view quickly here and paste it here. We can use this. Let me save this. We can use these components among with the text input and then segmented control. We are going to map over categories. And yeah, then we have this button to cancel. So let's just use this component and then let's go back here so that we can really understand what's happening in this component, okay? I'm going to come here and let's say add transactions component. And this is going to take an insert transaction. So we need to actually write this insert transaction function. This insert transaction is going to be a function that I'm going to create here. This is how it looks. Insert transaction takes a transaction as parameter, and then with transaction async, we are saying run async, okay? And then insert into transactions. We specified the data that we want to insert, and then the values. In this case, guys, we have 2, 4, 5 values that we are passing in this array of dependencies. I mean, in this array of variables, right? We pass the category, amount, date, description, type. And then we refetch everything again. Okay, very simple, just an insert using SQLite, so that we can pass this function here, hit save, and now we have this new entry button. So let's go to the add transaction, and let's see how this is working. We can actually create, let me clear the terminal. Let's create a new item. But what is happening when I press new entry? So we have this new entry button. That is basically just setting is adding transaction equal to true. So if I have this set, is adding transaction, then I want to display my card with my text input for amount, description, as you can see here. But what is happening here is that we are fetching the categories based on the expense or income of the segment control. This is a segment control. This library comes from React Native segment control. We install it at the beginning, okay? And then we are fetching select all from categories where category is equal to type. So at this point, it's equal to expense. And if I select income, this query is going to run again with income. And you can see that we have the income categories. Okay, sounds good. Then we have this input for the amount. So let's say 1, 2, 3, description, test. All right. And then bonus, or look what is happening every time that I select a new expense. I mean, a new category. We are handling the current selected, which is utilities in this case. And if I hit, is selected is equal to, it's going to be true if the type selected is equal to the category.name. Okay, so electronics, if it's selected, background blue, and this is the current value that we are setting. As soon as I press save, here's the save. Let's go to the handle save. We're just putting in the console and insert the transaction. So let's do that. Okay, and this is the input that we enter. Date, as you can see, it's a number. Description, test, type, expense. And here it is, because we are fetching by created at. Alrighty, guys. And that's pretty much all I wanted to show you. This was a pretty large video, but I think we covered a lot. I know that at the end I was, mostly copy pasting code because this is a fairly complex application, and we did some complex stuff like creating. We can cancel as well. We have this complex query to fetch the current month, start date and end date of the month. And then we are fetching ascending, descending order. We are long pressing to delete. These values are automatically updated every time we add or delete. So for example, let's say that we have something very expensive like $15,000 expense, expensive car, let's say. And then here, we can select something like household items, hit save. And yeah, if you expend this amount of money, you're going to be minus 8,000 in savings, okay? And this is great. This is what I like to see. Now, as I mentioned, guys, this application could be easily improved. But of course, this all depends on you. That's it for this lesson. If you actually want to improve, guys, your React Native skills, if you want to improve your TypeScript, if you want to learn how to create real-life scalable applications using the latest technologies with React Native, I would highly encourage you guys to go to codewithbeto.dev, and let me actually bring it here. Of course, this is the code of this lesson, completely free. But if you want to check out the courses like React Native course or Master React with TypeScript, we have a really nice promotion currently for the Master React with TypeScript course. And if you want to check out some other more complex advanced examples like Stripe template, Postman AI, I would highly encourage you guys to go check it out. We have actually some videos that show you about these applications and what you can get if you decide to buy them. Yeah, this is a great way to support the channel. And yeah, I hope you go and check it out. That's it for this video, guys. I hope you like it. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.